Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's 7 a.m. in San Francisco. It's 8 a.m. here in Scottsdale. It's 2 a.m. in Sydney. It's 11 p.m. in Shanghai, and it's 12:57 in Baltimore. That's an old George Carlin joke. Sorry about that. This is Doug Brunke. I am at our headquarters in Global Chamber in Scottsdale, Arizona. We have one of our speakers here and four of our speakers around the United States. And so thank you all for attending, both our speakers and all the viewers from all around the world, including, I think we've got folks coming in from Pakistan today, which is not exactly a great time there in Islamabad. We're really honored to have five amazing speakers today. They're going to be speaking for about 5 minutes each, and then we'll have about 30 minutes for questions. So we are going to close down within 60 minutes. We'll be talking about issues, challenges, but we'll also be really mainly talking about what are the solutions and where are we as a society, whether it's in the United States or around the world in the business community, for women in leadership. I would like to start, because our first speaker is going to be Martha Mertz, I'd like to start by reading something that perhaps most of you have read, and if you haven't, hopefully this is a reminder, and probably Martha will mention these as well. She wrote a book called Becoming Athena, which is right there, and she talked through a variety of research. She talked about 8 elements of a leadership model, and that's what I'd like to share with you. Living authentically, learning constantly, advocating fiercely, acting courageously, fostering collaboration, building relationships, giving back, and celebrating. So while we're going through the conversation today, keep those 8 in mind, and I'm sure, Martha, you'll be building off of those as well. Martha, I believe you're in Sedona, Arizona today.
Good morning. I am in Sedona, and it's a chilly morning.
It's a little bit frosty. Is it below freezing?
Yes, it was during the night, which is unusual for Sedona, but happy to be here this morning with you.
You've done so much. You're the founder of Athena International. You started, if I remember correctly, in a place called Lansing, Michigan. And it was inspired by, maybe it was a Chamber of Commerce person who told you that women don't really belong in leadership, and that kind of ticked you off, and kind of the rest is history. Tell us a little bit about kind of how you've evolved since then. I know you're in a variety of real estate businesses today. Tell us more about women in global leadership from your perspective.
Thank you, Doug. First of all, I'd like to thank you for putting this panel together about this very important subject. And I'd like to thank the other women on this panel, because each one of you are bringing a voice to some very important presence in the business community. And finally, I'd just like to say thanks to the Athena representation from around the country and beyond. I know that our president, Andrea Connor, is listening to you. I know that Christine Quaid, one of our board members, is in your audience. And we have recipients from around the country, Donna Davis being one, who they are all part of our big family of leadership. And I'm just happy to be here among the rest of you. So to go to your question, yes, I started a company in Michigan over 3 decades ago, at a time when women didn't normally start companies and nobody thought women belonged there. Frankly, just to skip to the present, I still am in charge of my company, and it has been a wonderful enterprise for me. Along the way, I was invited to become a board member for the Chamber of Commerce in Lansing, Michigan, where I was the only woman on the board. And one learns that if you're the only one of anything, that your voice is less likely to be heard. So we decided that we needed to do something about that in a positive way. And we drew from a quote from Plato: "What is honored in a country will be cultivated there." So we thought if we raised up one outstanding leader who was a woman in our community, that she would serve as a role model for other women to come into the community, to come into the chamber, to come to understand that this is the new face of leadership, and inspire women to step up and become the leaders that they are intrinsically. And we called it the Athena Award. That was a long time ago. It was instantly resonating in our community. And remember, that's one person once a year. And since that time, perhaps in the first several years, we had over 200 cities across the country, primarily through chambers of commerce, that started giving these awards because they could see that it served as a beacon to women, business owners. Come and join us. Come into this chamber or this organization and come together, because together we are stronger. And we've learned two things. One, it was very, very good for the membership of the chambers because women did feel welcome to come in. And the second thing we learned was that, as you mentioned at the beginning, women lead in a different way. And let me just say one thing about that. Women lead in a circle, and the traditional model of leadership is like a ladder. It's a hierarchy. And so there are these two different models. The Athena leadership model is, we all learn both of them, but women are the primary voices for these 8 principles of leadership. In other words, just to start with the top one, if the question about living authentically is, who am I? Each leader needs to know who they are, what they value, and are they living their values? Because if a leader isn't true to their own values, then no one is going to be inspired by that person to be compelled to follow in some vision to make something better within their community or their company. So we've gone through all of these leadership principles. They hold up. I looked at your panel and decided to assign different leadership qualities to each one. For Tina, I said fierce advocacy. For Felena and Kimberly, I said collaboration. For Donaji, I said building relationships. And Doug, I gave you giving back. So I'm happy to be part of this panel this morning because I think this conversation is going to be dynamic and compelling for people who are looking for, truly gender diverse leadership.
Thank you very much. And I would say Felena would be probably acting courageously, to be able to jump in, into what she's been able to do. What do you think? How do you feel, Felena? What's out of the 8? Where do you feel you land?
Sorry, let me make sure I'm unmuted there. My apologies. I love those. It's hard to say, it's collaboration and building community has been, really at the pinnacle of what I've done for the last decade. So probably would lean on that.
Appreciate it. So thank you very much, Martha, and we'll come back to you for questions. Felena is the CEO founder of Hera Hub. You're calling in from probably the San Diego metro area today. Is that fair?
Yeah.
And it's definitely probably not freezing there. You've created something that is primarily for women. So we definitely want to hear more about that and tell us more about the women in leadership, because that's obviously a topic that's near and dear to you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So I founded Hera Hub, a shared workspace and business accelerator for female entrepreneurs. I founded the company in 2010 and launched our first location in 2011. And a tiny bit about my background, I spent my 20s in technology startups, got the privilege of being laid off 3 times by the age of 30. 2 companies sold and 1 ran out of money. And it was at that time that I decided to kind of follow in the footsteps of my family. Both my parents are entrepreneurs, and start my first business, which was a marketing strategy company. That's what I did in the startup world, was marketing work. I had that company for 8 years and ran that out of my home. It was called Perspective Marketing. And I also was really got involved, I should say, in a number of professional women's organizations, one called Women's Global Network that was focused on helping women in developing nations through microcredit loans and support. And I ran the San Diego community for that organization for 2 years. And then I ran Ladies Who Launch, as in launch businesses, for 2 years here in San Diego, helping several hundred women launch their business over that period of time. And it was all of that that came together, the need for space and support and community and collaboration. I was working for myself, primarily by myself. I had contractors on projects, but no full-time employees, and just missed having that sense of community. And when I looked at the space options, they were at the time and still fairly focused on supporting technology startups, which is awesome and wonderful, and we definitely need that. But there was a gap in the market. It was either kind of uber professional, executive suite world, or like cool and hip and co-working space, beer kegs and ping pong tables. And both of those are awesome, but we needed something in between. So again, I founded the company in 2010. We now call it Spa-Inspired Workspace, but it is a serious place to launch and grow one's business. We have significant resources, including a formal business accelerator program called Hera Labs, an angel investment arm called Hera Angels, and we put on an annual conference to inspire more women to look at becoming angel investors for the purpose of getting more women funded. So we teach through a one-day conference and connect women from actually all over the world. We fly in angels from the U.S., Canada, Mexico. We had a woman from the Middle East come out who runs a angel network called Womena. And so we've grown really very organically through some of those connections. So we're now in the process of opening our 8th location in Atlanta. Beyond the locations that I founded in San Diego, which were 3, 2011, 12, and 13. I launched 3 locations here to really prove the model and break it and build it a few times over before we license the model out to other cities. So we're on the West Coast. We're there very proudly. There in Phoenix, we'll be opening in just about a month. Shaza Babur is an amazing woman there in the Phoenix Scottsdale area, just really doing an amazing job bringing community together. And as I mentioned, Atlanta, Washington, D.C., and we're also in Sweden.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that overview, and we'll now switch to, I believe, Las Vegas. Kimberly Daniels, CEO of Mercantile Logistics and International Trade. Kim, are you there?
Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you? You're in Vegas today, aren't you?
I am, and it's a bit chilly here too. I had to pull out my heavy coat.
Congratulations on your founding of the company. It's been a few years, obviously, and then your success. Love your picture. It's awesome. It says a lot, I think, hopefully about you. Tell us more about, you're a lady in logistics, which was talking to someone here recently, had lunch and in logistics, and she was saying that there's a lot of women in logistics, but most of them are at the admin level, very few in leadership. And she went through her company and said she was only one of 9, in the executive level. Is that what you see? And tell us more about kind of both where things are and then the progress still need to be made.
Yes, that is what I see a lot. Whenever I have to call other companies or I try to push forth on getting contracts, it takes a lot of legwork to get to the right person who will actually listen and understand what the plan is. So, for example, I pitched a company here locally, and it took a lot to get the owner of the company I was working with to just stop and listen to what I was saying and how much he could profit from what I was trying to push through. And a lot of that barrier, I was raised with no gender roles. My mom's a truck driver. So that's something that we just were very proud of for her, because it's not typically something women do. My father was an entrepreneur, and I was just raised that, look, you can't use your gender as an excuse. So I just always push forward, and I get them to listen sometimes.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much for that that overview. We'd like to now switch to Donaji Montes. She's, I believe, coming out of the Bay Area today. You're somewhere near Palo Alto, aren't you? Where are you, Donaji?
Right now I am home, but I will go to Stanford later today for a workshop. It's a global innovation leadership workshop. So yeah,
Fantastic.
I'm towards Palo Alto when I am done here. Mm-hmm.
Donaji and I have known each other for maybe close to 10 years. She was part of starting up Techba, Mexico operation here in the Phoenix area, and then you subsequently moved to the Silicon Valley area. You work with a lot of entrepreneurs. You are probably more often than not working with entrepreneurs that are more like your dad's age, and here's this young, really smart woman who has got it on the ball, and kind of an interesting perspective. I'm sure you probably got a lot of stories related to that, no doubt. Tell us more about women in leadership.
Thank you very much, Doug. I really appreciate the invitation for this amazing panel. I'm honored to be speaking with this woman. And I will just want to share a little bit of women in global leadership on my own perspective with tech, because that's what I do. I work for technology companies that want to do international business or international projects overseas. So if we go to the next one, we will see that sometimes, I'm very happy that Kimberly mentioned that she was not gender raised, but other people are not. So we put sometimes a lot of labels on other people, on ourselves. So I will share some labels for you, and I will use myself as an example. So my name is Donaji. Most of you have never heard that name before. No worries, it's an exotic name from a region of my country. And if I share some labels about me, I work for tech companies, small companies, most of them, and I have over 11 years of experience. I have worked with more than 30 international consultants, and I have helped more than 155 clients in all my career on the tech side. What else? I have a strong accent, and you can see a strong accent in English and also in my native language. And it happened that I am a woman. So you can put some labels on me. And if I ask you, where do you think I'm from? Unless you have read my resume or my bio or what Doug just mentioned, you paid attention, you will know where I'm from. But most people, when I ask them, when they ask me, where are you from? I ask them, where do you think? And so far, only one person have been able to guess at the first time. So it's really, really hard for people to understand where I'm from, even if I am speaking on my native language. That's very interesting for me. So I am from Mexico, but I've lived in Spain for over a year. That twists a lot my Spanish. And I am right now living in Silicon Valley. I live in the US since 2011. 2 years I live in Arizona, is where I met Doug. And now I've been, the rest in Silicon Valley, in California. Okay, so I will share some data with you about how are we doing as women in the US related with the tech. According with TechCrunch, 17% of startups have a female founder. And this hadn't changed since 2012. So for the last 5 years, we've been 17%. And I'm not talking about CEOs or C-level, I'm talking about founders. And that's very important for me because it's different that you get hired and that you start your own business. And what Felena was talking about, the investment, that is something to really highlight, because females don't get founded as easily as you can imagine. So we got, according to TechCrunch, 17% of angel seed, 13% of early stage, and 70% of late stage. And you can see a graph of the last years related with that. And if I zoom in the Silicon Valley, how we are doing. According to the Silicon Valley Index, the share of science and engineering degrees, the woman has remained at 37 to 38 for the past 17 years. So that proportion hadn't changed for 17 years. And according to Observer, women hold only 11% of executive positions of Silicon Valley companies. That is also, can show you how we are dominated, most likely in tech, by men. And about wages, it's also an interesting topic. We have a gap. And whomever tells you that is not true, well, they can see the statistics. And if you see the bachelor degree and more, it's where the gap on average is very, very, very impressive. Almost 50%, 49% is the difference between the average between men and women. And what about men? So should we focus only about women in tech? For me, let me give you some of my insight. I did an international workshop last year on my university, and I put this name, Woman, Dare to Become an Entrepreneur in Tech. And that workshop was focused only for women. And what happened? Men show up. I couldn't believe it. And I was very, very thrilled and very happy because not only one or two, a couple of them show up and they did a good job. At the end of the workshop, I did an apology because I was not very inclusive on the name of my workshop. And they gave me a lesson. They didn't care if the diploma will have women, if there were men, they just show up and they did a good job. And I'm sharing just some percentage of my own tech experience. Of all the consultants I've worked with and I oversee their work, 63% are men. Of all my tech bosses, 75% have been men. And this is the most of my clients, 96% have been men. So I'm a woman, and most of the time I'm talking or dealing with a man. And now I'm used to this, but I want just to show you how it is to work in tech as a woman. And for me, the big question is how to be inclusive and diverse. And I just want to share, as the last slide, a model that has helped me in my company that includes three aspects. One is flexibility, because we adapt an action plan and a team customized for each client and project. The other one is mobility. We work with internet as we are doing right now. Some part of my team is in Mexico, others in the US. I have a US citizen living in Thailand, so we have people in Asia as well. I have a strong clients and consultants relationship that I have never met in person. Everything has been remote. And they pay me and they're happy with my work, and that is nice, right? And I've been a remote keynote speaker at international conferences, just working with my laptop and my internet. And the diversity is very important. For me, it's not only talking about women, it's seeing how women and men can work better together, how we can foster women to become leaders and understand how to deal with men, because that's also a challenge sometimes, and how you can work with different generations and ethnicities. It's not only about gender, it's about how people think, it's about where they were born and how their values are. And well, that's pretty much what I have. And I give you my LinkedIn, my Skype, and my Twitter in case you want to be in contact with me. Thank you very much, too.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Donaji. Our next speaker is Tina Sweis, and she is the founder of Overachieving Women. And I don't know of anyone here in Scottsdale that's more overachieving in terms of her capabilities. Obviously, everyone on this panel is an amazing achievement person. Tina is from Amman, Jordan, and she came to the United States primarily to make sure that her son had the appropriate medical treatment. You know, she was a multiple entrepreneur in Jordan, and now she's working on a variety of different entrepreneurial ventures here in the United States, so she can bring a little bit of that perspective as well. So, Tina, please give us your perspective. Probably gonna have to turn this down a little bit.
Sure. All right, so I'll be speaking here and here. I'd like to see everyone. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming out here. Doug introduced me as Tina. I want to introduce you to also my Arabic name, Fatina. Fatina is a very unique Arabic name. I was named that name from my grandfather. It's a very strong name that's only used in poetry. I was born and raised in Chicago, but my family was Jordanian. My father was an entrepreneur. My mom is a stay-at-home mom. We moved to Jordan when I was really young. I chose to stay in Jordan because I grew up thinking, you know, this is home. This is where you're going to grow up. These are the ethics you're going to acquire, where the American community is not going to provide you with. Long story short, I grew up in Jordan, and I always felt like there's always that cultural difference. However, I always saw the need where people were really hungry for change, for new ideas, for innovation, not the way others see it as, you know, mimicking what the other parts of the world are doing, but something customized to the local community over there. I worked in so many different initiatives in Jordan. I worked in entrepreneurship, I worked in change management, I worked in education reform, and I worked in women empowerment with microfunding women, creating a more with less concept using the resources available in Jordan without relying on external donations or external, which is the case in the Middle East for everyone. I was very proud of my career path. My last post was, I was an advisor for the Prime Minister's office. I was the advisor for the youth policy, for job creation, for creating entrepreneurship hubs, for matching local companies with international companies for recognition and funding. But again, I was a woman, and the problem over there was not only you're a woman, you're a Christian young woman in an Arab Muslim dominant country, and you made it. You are the youngest advisor at the Prime Minister's office. You're handling a very crucial issue, which is youth policy, and people look at you and they're like, what? How did you end up there? Whose daughter are you? How did you, for the first 2 months I worked at the Prime Minister's office, I didn't even tell my parents I was working there because it's a big issue. I'm like, how did you get that job? I was working for the sake of change. I was very proud of the accomplishments that we've made both on the public sector and the private sector levels. I created an inspiration channel called New Think Theater, which is Masrah al-Fikr al-Jadid in Arabic, where I was actually highlighting stories of everyone, male, female, wherever you're coming from. How did you fail miserably, and what did you do about it? Because we realized that the world is taking a lot of attention to, success, good stories, lovely stories. Of course, with social media, everybody's looking perfect. I wanted to show the other side that People go through circumstances where it's so hard. It's not as easy. Like you go into any community, probably in a foreign country, and then you apply. You probably get funding for the idea. People respect you without any other criteria involved. Like, are you a woman? Are you Muslim? Are you Christian? Of course, segregation is everywhere, but I wanted to celebrate why people are failing in the Middle East. And that has actually created a ripple effect of change where all of the problems and all of the resources that were not there were created right on the spot. And I have to say, from my experience, I would love to say that the stories that I've seen about women in the Middle East who are actually leading, but they don't know that they're leaders. They don't actually think about it. They're just doing what they're doing. They are the head of the household. They are creating the resources. They are entrepreneurs in their own little businesses, but they're not given attention as leaders. After doing everything that I was very passionate about, I realized that us as women, we have, regardless of the differences I would say between men and women, we have one unique quality, and it's a very significant resource, is that we cannot isolate our professional life from our personal life. And this is something that I've lived. While I was at the top of my career, I was doing everything. Of course, there's life. My son was born with a very rare birth defect. He has bacterial association. And as much as I was involved in so many initiatives for children as well, I had never heard of it. I didn't know what to do. All I knew is, okay, all the resources that I tried to create in a country are not going to do any good for my son. So the choice I have to do is leave everything and start over. I came to the US 4.5 years ago, and luckily my son is doing really well. He's a very gifted boy. We have had 18 surgeries so far, and he's a beautiful young boy. But it gave me the biggest lesson of my life is, as a woman, how do you start over? And when I say start over in a community, in a culture that you're not used to, you're not networked to, it's like, literally, it's like probably taking one of you and a very professional, very strong leader in her field and putting her probably in a refugee camp somewhere in the Middle East where there's no electricity, there's no water, there's nothing. You literally have to start over. And one of the things I said is, even if you, one of the things Athena said is leadership actually for women is a circle. And I really thank you for that, because before I used to look at the leadership skills that I've acquired personally and professionally as a ladder, honestly. And you would see it, I think it's also affected by our education, regardless where we are. We're going through grade levels. We are going until you graduate and you become something where you are. And I realized, no, it's a circle. It's a circle that our personal and professional life keeps rotating all the time. I really want to thank Felena for creating a workspace for women. And I want to add for you, like, I would love to work, but I also want to have in the workplace something where my children are with me. Because if I go back to the roots, when you go back in history, you go back to the roots and you see, how did women who were not labeled as leaders in history, how are they leading? They were actually leading. They were changing history. How are they leading? They actually did all of it at the same time in the same circle. But they also always came back to that little point in the circle that tells them, no matter where life throws you, the skills, the personality, the characteristics you acquire as you're growing will still be there. And this is basically, when I met Doug, this is basically what he saw in me and really helped me. Wherever you are, you can still network. Let me just turn on the lights, turn on the network, turn on the opportunities, and you will continue to do the same thing that you did, all of the experiences that you've done, you can do them somewhere else. And I'm more passionate about doing a lot of the lessons and the experiences I've done, the creative experiences I've lived in the Middle East for Arizona, because when I compare, actually, some of the tech hubs in the Middle East and even the women leadership programs in the Middle East right now are 100 years ahead of Arizona, and I really feel like there's a lot to be done over here. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
You
can stay there.
Okay.
And I'm going to walk around here. I am really moved by so much that was spoken about. I'd like to ask all of the speakers before we get to questions, are there things that you heard there that moved you or that you would like to add to? Yes, please, Felena. Cesar, thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah. I love the tone of some of the conversations here in regards to inviting men into events, into our workspaces. Hera Hub is, we say, female focused, but absolutely not exclusive to women. The way I like to articulate it is, and it's been articulated here a few times, that women have stepped into a business world that we did not create, right? And so oftentimes we're the outsider, right? We're stepping in, we show up to an event, especially a tech event, and you're one woman, one out of every 20 or so. And there's challenges with that, and we've seen that play out recently, or be highlighted recently, I should say. And so, the goal behind what we're doing with Hera Hub and Hera Labs and Hera Angels and Hera Fund is, creating a space and a community that is, for women, by women, but also inviting men into that conversation. So we do have male members in our spaces. We have men in the space every day. It's not about exclusion. It is about bringing us all together. But in this case, it's us creating the platform and, asking that they, be respectful of the things that are important to us in those conversations.
That makes sense. Yes, Martha?
Thank you. I'd like to just take the other perspective. I think that what Kimberly just talked about is fundamentally important. But it's also fundamentally important for women to be represented at the tables where decisions are made that affect all of us. And that's a place that I have been fighting to achieve for all of this time. And it's really part of what the philosophy of Athena International is about. Unless we are able to frame the conversation to include us and the outcomes to take us into consideration, then we'll always be on this separate path. And I think that ultimately the civilization needs to come together and learn to lean on and take advantage of and benefit from all of the strengths, regardless of what gender or what background or what perspective a person has. So my goal, or our goal as an organization, is to find a way to bring more women first to understand their own leadership strengths, because we've just listened to all these fabulous leaders, and every one of them has strengths that are important in our society. Bring those to those people and those perspectives to the table so that they will be incorporated into the outcomes that we have. And so, and I thought 30 some years ago that as soon as we figured this out, that we were out of balance, that it would become balanced, that everyone would see the wisdom of that. And boy, was I wrong. So now we've got about maybe 20%. I'll put the percentages up a little bit from what Donaji was talking about, but maybe 20% representation. But what we've seen in studies from coast to coast in this country and beyond is that when women are included at the table, when women are in senior management levels or on boards of directors, the organization benefits. Return on investments increase. Employee satisfaction is higher. The product improvement happens. So study after study has shown that that is the case. What holds us back? Why aren't we more involved at those levels? And that's a question that I bet every one of us would have a different answer to. And part of it might be that it's just easier to work with people who are like you. And so the people in charge right now, the people in the C-suites, hire people or are attracted to bring people in who look like them. So women in corporate America, institutions, educational institutions, need to be brought along and given a hand and mentored. We need that, and we need to do that for each other. Women need to help each other. If I'm in a C-suite position, I need to reach out and bring along others, open leadership opportunities for them as well. So those are just perspectives that over 3 decades I've formulated.
Thank you, Martha. Kim?
Yes, actually what Martha said was a really great point on bringing people in who look like us, and women do it too. So I pulled up an infographic from 2015 that shows that women running a company employ 80% females and only 20% men. And the men who run a company, it's 70% men, 30% women. So it is a human nature. It is something that we all tend to do. One of the things that my company does is we try to help small businesses when it comes to the logistics procedures of their goods coming into and out of the United States as customs brokers, as freight managers. What we have here in the office is 100% women run. So we're doing the exact same thing. But what I find is when I try to hire men to do the jobs that I need them to do, and it's not a stereotypical thing. It's that seeing the future, seeing the vision that I'm trying to push is lost. And I don't know if it's just a way that women think are so different than men. Again, I was brought up, you don't use your gender as an excuse. And I worked on a farm, lived on a farm, I moved around a lot. So, you never got I'm a girl, I can't pick that up, just I would get in trouble. So, it's when I try to bring in men and show them that, look, this is what we're providing. It's a low-cost solution for small business owners to smooth their cash flow and be able to get their goods in and out of the country. Men are like, why? Usually the pushback I get from a lot of them that I try to hire is, why would we do that? That's killing your profit. And I'm like, it's not, because if my clients stay in business longer, that's the longer amount of time and the more capital I can get later. If I try to gouge them now, then they may not be in business tomorrow. And so what am I going to do tomorrow? Now I've got to spend all that time and all that resource and all that energy getting another client. I would rather, make it make sense. And again, the pushback is, why?
Yeah, that may be less a man thing, maybe just dumb people thing. I'm not sure. But I think, whether it's culture, whether it's religion, whether it's skin color, whether it's, behavior, personality type. I mean, I think what you're all saying is, I think all of us have experienced being in a group where we felt like we were, not the norm. And we know how that feels, and it's not good. The question then becomes, does it make sense to have a diverse group? The data, as Tina, you mentioned, shows that if you're a company that's going into a diverse market, you better have a diverse team. If you're a Japanese company and you're only selling in Japan, which 99% Japanese, I think you can argue, having been the one crazy, non-Japanese in a Japanese company of 300, it felt weird, but I felt like I was valuable. But did it make sense for them to have, Hindus and, and a whole variety of different diverse if you're only selling to the Japanese market? Maybe not. But the reason why we're interested in this is not only so that folks like you can get involved in global business, but global companies, I think, practically speaking, need to be diverse, or else they're going to miss opportunities. It's, I think, fairly logical. So I would encourage all of you, you're all unmuted. Just jump in when you can. I do have one question, though, that I would like to ask and insert, so feel free to answer old questions. The question I have that has come in is, it feels like we're in a historical period of time right now in the world, where, for the role of women is potentially changing in a significant way through the Weinstein thing and the Me Too movement. Are we in an historical period of time, and what do we do about it to impact change?
I wanted to say something, maybe I didn't start with it, about the Overachieving Women Association that I started based on both my professional and my personal experience, my story with my son. A lot of the times the struggle was, why isn't there enough medical research on this to find solutions? Why do children have to suffer? Why does my own son have to go through pain? And of course, I don't want to sound cliche, like someone who has a personal story that's going to be an advocate for that disease or something. It's very respectable and it's everywhere. But one of the things I realized that I wanted to do is, because I realized when I connected with 28,000 women in the Middle East who I've worked with, I said, I'm on a different location, but I can actually use, the connection to put these women together and steer a committee of what are their actual needs. I found a group of Middle Eastern research scientists, and one of them is in Montreal, Canada, one of them is in Boston, and they work in the field of stem cell research, which is really related to my son's case. And I said, I don't want to tell my son's story. When he grows up, that will be his story to tell. But what I want to create is basically the funding for women created by women. So I created an association for women in business to actually create funding for women in medical research. Because when I saw the numbers of how many women get the actual grant for medical research, from 1,000 women applying, 4 men applying, 3 men get it, and 1 woman gets the third one. And I was like, why is that? And the answer was always because there isn't enough data that women can do this, and women are actually more active in associations and organizations. They're more networked throughout history, so they get the funding. So I created this solution, which is basically women in business in the Middle East right now are actually paying $12 a year. Multiply this by 28,000 women, I was able to fund 2 researches that are, one is related to my son, which is creating stem cell kidneys, spare kidneys from stem cells from teeth. It's very complicated. And the second thing is to actually provide enough medical research to actually operate on the women, save the pain for the child before they're actually born. And it's happening. However, there's always not enough data, not enough funding. I said the data is probably not my responsibility, but I can create the funding and connect all of the families that can give the data to the scientists at the same time. That is the Overachieving Women Association. And I want to end with saying our personal experiences and our professional experiences eventually will click and make sense. And they will enable us to take the hand of another woman or man. Thank you, Michael, for joining us. I'm not saying we need to create more women leaders. I'm saying we need to actually create cooperatives between men and women, so that right now, in this point of time and in point of history, there no longer needs to be you're a woman and I'm a man. We're 2 separate brains. And when I was working in a lot of the posts that I was in, I actually kept on telling myself in the morning, this is at home. What I'm walking around with is actually a brain. and my brain is walking, and I will tell men who are actually questioning my abilities, you're talking to my brain, nothing else.
Other comments?
Well, I'd like to go back to your question, Doug, about are things different now? And I think that because I'm pretty obviously, I've been involved in this longer than any of the other panelists here, I have a longer perspective, and it is, I think that things are different now. I think that we have, as women and men and as societies, we have a new opportunity to pull this together and begin to really understand what we bring to the table and what is still needed. So I'm sure that each one of the panelists here would have a different positive idea about what can be done to make some permanent changes to the circumstances so that we don't have to live where things were 30 years ago. I think it's new. I think it's an opportunity.
I'd like to jump in on that. One of the things that I had to do this year was actually apply for WeBank, which I was like pushing against. I didn't want to do it. I was like, again, it's that no gender roles thing and using gender as an excuse. And I didn't want to have to do that. But I found here in Las Vegas, just to get a seat at the table, to even be heard, I had to have that check blocked by my name, just to be seen. And so, yeah, there are definitely some changes happening right now, but I think a lot of it still needs more pushing, and it can be, you know, in how we raise our children and showing them that there are no differences when it comes to getting the work done, and that gender is simply an excuse. I find that if you will, or if people will just see that there's a value in working with all companies, regardless of the gender of the person running them, and just bring us all to the table so we can all make our pitch instead of saying, oh, they've got women-owned business by their name. Oh, and they're a veteran-owned business. Now we'll listen to them. That actually, I feel like maybe that particular initiative by our government might actually be holding back the progress sometimes.
You know, while the next person just please jump in, but one of the comments we have is from Myanmar, and it doesn't have a name here, but it says, greetings. Thank you for sharing. In Myanmar, we have half or more than half of the entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs are women. Even the country leader is a woman. Our government has even started to make jokes by asking, what happened to all the men? It's really extraordinary to see the quick uprising and the growth of women in business and leadership positions around the world, which brings up the issue of, you know, it's country by country, right, in terms of how perception is. But, you know, there's a little bit of broad brush, but there's also, you know, there's issues you see everywhere, but then there you've got Myanmar, which has other issues.
Mm-hmm.
Another question that's come in is about negotiating and the negotiating styles that tend to be a little bit different, men and women. Have you noticed any differences and changes there? And how do you deal with that?
I want to
go ahead.
No, just briefly, we just did a blog post and a video on this because it's such an interesting topic to me. I think that when I look at my life and where I was raised and how I was raised, negotiation wasn't part of how I was brought up. And I think that's where women from other countries have probably a huge advantage over at least what I saw growing up, which is negotiation is part of life. You're negotiating for everything. You go to buy a piece of fruit and you're probably negotiating. And so I think, I'm just speaking broadly as U.S. women, we aren't taught that, and it is a disservice because women that I see, and even myself, when I get into a negotiation, sometimes I get a little uncomfortable. Sometimes, I don't want conflict, right? And so, whereas I think more men in the U.S., just speaking here, are taught, conflict is okay, and just a different approach, so to speak. So I think U.S. women have a long way to go to perfect our negotiating skills.
Well, I've been in a lot of negotiations because, as you heard earlier, I've been a real estate developer and owner of real estate for many, many years, and that takes a lot of negotiation at every step. And what I've learned is that the strong leader, regardless of gender, doesn't have to lead by ego. You lead from the strength that you bring to that and your view and your vision for what can be done together. And another thing that women bring that I think is a solid negotiating skill is that we're great listeners and observers. So we see, that's part of learning constantly. We see and observe more, not so much from the words that are spoken, but from the tone of voice or from the body language and those kinds of things. So I think women have other great skills for negotiation, and our job is to learn our own strengths and to figure out what are we good at, and then how can we apply those in ways that might be innovative in the business world and might be really additive and might bring great value. So those are all contained within the Athena leadership model that I talked about earlier. But if we learn our own strengths, then we can bring to the table something that might not be there, that might be the element that is needed most.
I'll agree with that. I find that women, and this was pointed out to me at the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses panel I was at last week, and that women tend to be more interested in caretaking. So when we negotiate, it's not that we tend to go back on what we want to do, but we go further to find that yes. So when we're negotiating each way, it's how can I help you come to the realization that this is the program that you want or that this is the product that you want, and kind of working that out, whereas there's, like you said, there's no ego that we really kind of hold on to. It's more of a how can we take care of the situation. So I agree with that, Martha.
And I would like to add something because I am very transparent. And for one ex-boss, that was a weakness, right? It's like, no. You have to cover your back and you have to make sure that nobody is doing this, and you have to think that everybody is like trying to do something bad for you. And I was like, I don't want to be that person. To be honest, that's okay if you want to approach that way life. But for me, and I'm very open to my clients, it's like, this is me, and you can read my face and my voice super easily. I am a terrible liar. So I always try to do a negotiation that will make sense for both sides. And if they have questions or if they want to know better, I can go into detail. But that has helped me a lot to understand the other timing and the other's position in a way both of us can win. So I always ask if it's okay or not, and then I build on that. So I think it's as they have said, we need to know our strengths and own it, and don't see it as a weakness, because one of my business coach told me, well, what you think it's a weakness, it's not, because a lot of business people will value to work with you because you're honest and transparent as you are. So you don't have to change yourself. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to cover my back all the time, because I want to work with people that I can rely on and that I trust and I like to work with. So yes, thank you very much.
No regrets.
In
That's
terms
awesome.
of negotiating, just to show a different part of the world, I grew up and I was raised in a culture, and I'm sure there are many cultures that would relate to that. And if I talk to them, they say, well, you get it. American girls don't get it. And one of the things is you're not supposed to, we're brought up in a way that women do not negotiate. If you're a girl, you're a woman, you do not negotiate. What the man says is what the man says. You don't negotiate. It's a cultural thing. You can't negotiate. You can't talk back. You can't, giving your opinion is not a matter of giving your opinion at this point. It's a matter of respect. It's a cultural thing. It's a tribal cultural thing over there. So if a woman actually wants to say, even if she's a representative, she's elected representative, when she wants to speak, she does not negotiate, because it's not a trait associated with women in that part of the world. So I was like, so if I negotiate, I'm going to be the outcast. I'm going to get into more trouble just for negotiating. So I've actually learned a different way of negotiating. I don't say it, I actually do it. So I don't negotiate with you, I actually do the 3 different things that will show you the difference, and it's right in your face and you see it. And that has actually helped me in creating the resources for men to actually make the decision in terms of changing policy and creating different laws. I did not negotiate with them because I felt like it's a waste of time. I'm going to be labeled as, no, you're being disrespectful. I don't know if it's, I haven't seen it anywhere in the U.S. and probably Europe, some places in Europe. And that's why even when people want to go and do business in the Middle East, those cultural factors are one of the biggest components that you need to understand before you go in there. It's like, it's a tribal little town where a woman is expected to be of certain traits. And if you actually go back to becoming Athena, if you actually go back to history and literature, these were also traits associated by women and passed on throughout, but it's just a matter of how you interpret them. I give an advice to all women, do negotiate, but do create the solution and put it on the table rather than just negotiating for the first step. Overachieving to me is actually believing that women can not only achieve one step in doing one thing. I feel like we can actually put 4 different panels on the circle that we're in at the same time. That's our superpower. I'm so happy that my 4-year-old superhero is Wonder Woman. And when I ask him, Mom, why is she here? I mean, you have the entire Justice League and Marvel all over the place. This is what's controlling our kids wherever they go. And he's like, Mom, you always taught me that the strongest power anybody has is truth, and that's what she does. She has a lasso of truth. I've been writing my son letters every day since he was 1.5 years, and definitely a lot of the things that you guys said are crucial things that I want my son to know when he opens his letters at the age of 16. So he doesn't have that gender association or the cultural association growing up to be a man that I want him to be, or that he chooses to be.
And next time his hero could be Black Panther, so, diversity, gender balance, these are all, I love what you said about your brain. We're all brains, right? Walking around, and the companies that take advantage of those opportunities are going to be the successful ones, and the data actually prove it. We're going to end. The bell that you might have heard was my phone telling me tomorrow is International Mother Language Day. So that's awesome, and I know International Women's Day is coming up because there's an Athena International Award program coming up on the March 8th or 9th, I believe. March 8th. So, and I imagine those are happening all around the country. So definitely jump into that. Our next event is tomorrow about, I believe it's on factoring. We have another event on Monday, which is the Mexico Outlook. That's on the 26th. We have another Women in Global Leadership event where all the women are somewhere else in other parts of the world. That's in April, so watch for that. We have other events coming up in the next few weeks on international banking and also building your services business across borders. So how about a round of applause for our speakers today? You're all amazing. If anybody's watching this, and I saw Samra from Islamabad, sorry I didn't see what you had said, so we'll follow up on that. We will post a blog post on this. I saw Andrea Connor and a message that you had sent about talking about that the world is maybe at an inflection point or a turning point in the world. So Andrea, thank you, the CEO for Athena International, the current one. So thank you for all that you do, and thank you for the collaboration. Thank all of you for contributing today, and you have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.